Have you ever wondered how the shadows of a history steeped in slavery still shape our modern society? It's a chilling question, isn't it? But it's one we must confront if we are to truly understand the world we live in today. Our story begins not in the recent past but centuries ago, when the first chains of bondage were forged. This tale is not just about the pain and suffering endured, but also about resilience, courage, and the indomitable human spirit. We delve into the origins of slavery, charting its evolution from ancient civilizations to the transatlantic trade. We explore the life of the enslaved, their struggles and their dreams. We bear witness to the key historical events that eventually led to the abolition of this inhumane practice. And finally, we examine the enduring legacy of slavery that continues to echo through the ages. Join us on this revealing journey through the annals of slavery. In the annals of human history, slavery has been a sorrowful constant. As far back as we can trace, the bondage of one human being to another has been a grim reality. The roots of slavery are deep, entwined in the earliest civilizations. Let's embark on a journey back in time to the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, where the first records of slavery emerge. Here, in the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, slavery was a well-established institution around 4,000 years before the Common Era. Slaves were seen as property, bought and sold like livestock, often as spoils of war or punishment for debt. As civilizations evolved and empires rose and fell, slavery persisted. In ancient Greece, for instance, it was a common practice. Slaves served as domestic servants, laborers, and even teachers. In Rome, at the height of its empire, slaves were so numerous that they could constitute up to 40% of the population. Fast forward to the 15th century, a dark chapter in history unfolds with the dawn of the transatlantic slave trade. As European powers began exploring and colonizing the New World, a devastating demand for labor led to the horrific mass enslavement of African people. The transatlantic slave trade, also known as the triangular trade, was a complex system involving multiple continents. Europe sent manufactured goods to Africa, where they were exchanged for slaves. These slaves were then transported across the Atlantic, enduring brutal conditions in the infamous Middle Passage. Upon reaching the Americas, they were traded for raw materials, which were shipped back to Europe. The scale of this trade was staggering. Over 4 centuries, it's estimated that 12 to 15 million Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic. Bear in mind, though, that these figures only account for those who survived the brutal journey. The actual number of people torn from their homelands is likely far higher. The transatlantic slave trade was driven not merely by economic greed, but was also justified through a pernicious ideology of racial superiority. This ideology, coupled with the dehumanizing nature of the trade, had profound and lasting effects on societies across the globe. The transatlantic slave trade, as we know, was a brutal and inhumane institution. Yet, it's crucial to remember that it was also a system upheld by laws and societal norms of the time. This grim reality serves as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink when blinded by prejudice and greed. And so, the transatlantic slave trade set the stage for centuries of human suffering. It marked a brutal period in human history, characterized by the commodification of human beings on an unprecedented scale. As we delve deeper into our journey through the history of slavery, let's keep in mind the millions of lives forever marked by this horrific institution. The life of a slave was one of daily struggle and sorrow. Imagine a life where every sunrise brought not hope, but the dread of unending hardship. This was the reality for millions of enslaved men, women, and children. In the early hours of the morning, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon, the sound of the overseer's whip cracking in the air would signal the start of another grueling day. From the cotton fields of the American South to the sugar plantations of the West Indies, each day was a cycle of relentless labor, scarce nourishment, and the ever-present threat of punishment. Slaves lived in rudimentary shacks, often with dirt floors and little protection from the elements. Clothing was minimal, and meals were typically cornmeal, salted fish, or leftover scraps. Despite the bleakness, they clung to their humanity and found ways to endure. Let's delve into the personal narratives, the diary entries, the glimpses into their lives that give us a stark understanding of their experiences. Consider the words of Frederick Douglass, a man born into slavery who later escaped to freedom. He wrote, "I have often been awakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks of an own aunt of mine, whom he used to tie up to a joist, and whip upon her naked back till she was literally covered with blood. Then there's the account of Harriet Jacobs, a woman who spent 7 years hiding in a tiny crawl space to evade the sexual advances of her master. In her own words, the garret was only 9 feet long and 7 wide, the highest part was 3 feet high and sloped down abruptly to the loose board floor. There was no admission for either light or air. These stories, heartbreaking as they are, paint a vivid picture of the resilience and strength that defined the enslaved people. They found solace in their communities, in shared songs and stories, in stolen moments of joy amidst the sorrow. They found hope where there seemed to be none. We must also remember that slaves weren't just victims, they were fighters. They resisted their dehumanization in myriad ways, from subtle acts of defiance like feigning illness or breaking tools, to more overt acts like staging rebellions or running away. Take the story of Nat Turner, an enslaved preacher who led a rebellion in Virginia in 1831. Or the tale of Sojourner Truth, who escaped with her infant daughter and later became an outspoken abolitionist. Their bravery was a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who lived a life in shackles. Indeed, the life of a slave was one of daily struggle and sorrow, yet it was also a life of resistance, of strength, of a relentless pursuit of freedom. In the face of such despair, resistance began to take root. These roots would grow into a tree of rebellion and eventually liberation. In the face of injustice, the human spirit fights for freedom. This statement rings true throughout history, and it is particularly poignant in the context of slavery. The struggle against this gross violation of human rights was marked by numerous revolts, the rise of the abolitionist movement, and the bloody conflict of the American Civil War. Slave revolts were not uncommon occurrences. They were expressions of resistance and desperation, a cry for freedom against the tyranny of bondage. One of the most significant of these was the Haitian Revolution, which began in the late 18th century. This was a successful insurrection led by enslaved Africans in Saint-Domingue, a French colony. The revolution resulted in the establishment of Haiti, the first independent nation in Latin America, and more notably, the first country to be founded by former slaves. In the United States, Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831 stands out in the annals of slave revolts. Turner, an enslaved African-American preacher, led a group of fellow slaves in a violent uprising against their white oppressors in Virginia. Though the revolt was suppressed, it sent shockwaves through the southern states and led to stricter slave codes and laws. Parallel to these revolts, the abolitionist movement was gaining momentum. This was a social and political campaign aimed at ending the slave trade and emancipating slaves. Abolitionists came from all walks of life. Some were former slaves like Frederick Douglass, who used his powerful oratory and writing skills to expose the horrors of slavery. Others were white allies such as William Lloyd Garrison, who published the influential anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator. The abolitionist movement played a vital role in bringing the issue of slavery to the forefront of public consciousness. It laid the groundwork for the legal and societal changes that would eventually lead to the abolition of slavery. The American Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was the culmination of these tensions over slavery. The conflict was essentially a clash between the northern states, known as the Union, who were largely against slavery, and the southern states, known as the Confederacy, who wanted to preserve their right to own slaves. The war was brutal and bloody, resulting in the death of more than 600,000 soldiers. The war ended with the Union's victory, and this marked a major turning point in the history of slavery. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, ratified in 1865, officially abolished slavery throughout the nation. These events marked turning points in the long and tortuous road towards abolition. They are a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, the enduring belief in the principles of freedom and equality, and the relentless pursuit of justice in the face of oppression. The tides of change were unstoppable. As the winds of revolt stirred, the path to liberation was being paved, not only by the slaves themselves, but also by a growing number of individuals who believed in the inherent dignity and equality of all human beings. This was a period of profound legal and societal transformation, a time when the institution of slavery, once considered an unshakable pillar of economic prosperity, began to crumble under the weight of moral scrutiny and humanistic ideals. The abolitionist movement was instrumental in this shift. This diverse group of individuals, united by their shared disdain for the institution of slavery, worked tirelessly to expose its inhumanity and advocate for its end. Their efforts were met with fierce resistance, but their resolve remained unbroken. They were not merely voices crying out in the wilderness. They were the embodiment of a collective conscience awakening to the harsh reality of systemic oppression. Among these abolitionists, there were many who stood out for their courage and dedication. One such figure was William Lloyd Garrison, a prominent journalist and social reformer. Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, served as a potent platform for anti-slavery rhetoric, shedding light on the harsh realities of slavery and rallying support for its abolition. His words were like sparks igniting the tinder of societal consciousness, leading many to question the morality of slavery. Another significant figure was Frederick Douglass, a formerly enslaved man who became a powerful orator and writer. Douglass's narrative, a harrowing account of his life in bondage, served as a damning indictment of slavery. His eloquent speeches and tireless advocacy played a pivotal role in shifting public opinion and galvanizing support for abolition. Then there was Sojourner Truth, a woman of unparalleled courage and conviction. Born into slavery, Truth escaped with her infant daughter and went on to become a powerful advocate for both abolition and women's rights. Her iconic speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" delivered at a women's rights convention, remains a poignant reminder of the intersectionality of oppression and the shared struggle for equality and justice. The tireless efforts of these and countless other abolitionists ultimately led to legal changes that marked the beginning of the end for slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued by President Abraham Lincoln in 1862, declared slaves in Confederate-held territory to be free. This was followed by the 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, which officially abolished slavery throughout the United States. But the path to liberation was not a smooth one. It was paved with trials and tribulations punctuated by moments of triumph and despair. And while legal abolition marked a significant milestone, it was merely the first step in a long and arduous journey towards true liberation. And yet the echoes of chains could still be heard. The shackles were broken, but the scars remain. As the echoes of chains faded into the annals of history, the impacts of slavery continue to reverberate through our society, the world we live in today. The legacy of slavery is multifaceted, complex, and deeply ingrained. It's not just a chapter in history, it's a thread woven into the fabric of our society, influencing countless aspects of our lives. As we delve into the subject of housing, we stumble the haunting specter of segregation. The legacy of slavery and subsequent era of Jim Crow laws have shaped the geography of our cities and neighborhoods, leading to racially segregated communities, a phenomenon that persists even today. In the criminal justice system, the legacy of slavery is perhaps most starkly visible. The racial disparities in arrest rates, sentencing, and incarceration are a grim testament to the enduring shadows of the past. But don't just take our word for it. Let's hear from experts. Historians and scholars have dedicated their lives to studying and understanding the complex legacy of slavery. They point to the undeniable between the institution of slavery and the systemic racial disparities that persist in our society. Dr. James Peterson, a renowned historian, explains, the legacy of slavery is not just a historical fact, it's a living reality that continues to shape our society. The racial disparities we see today are not coincidental. They are the direct result of centuries of systemic racism, rooted in the institution of slavery. Similarly, sociologist Dr. Angela Davis asserts, the legacy of slavery is deeply woven into the fabric of our society. It has shaped our institutions, our laws, and our collective consciousness. To understand the world we live in today, we must understand the legacy of slavery. In essence, the legacy of slavery is not confined to history books. It is a living, breathing part of our society, subtly influencing the way we perceive and interact with the world. The ghost of slavery still haunts us unseen ways. As we forward, it's crucial that we acknowledge and confront this legacy, for it's only by understanding our past that we can hope to shape a more equitable future. Slavery wears many masks. Even in our contemporary society, the specter of slavery persists, albeit in a more concealed and insidious form. The chains may not be visible, but they remain as real and as binding as they were centuries ago. In the world today, we find a disturbingly vast number of people living in conditions that echo the horrors of historical slavery. Exploitation and coercion have taken on new guises, but their essence remains unchanged. We see this in the grim reality of human trafficking, where men, women, and children are forcibly transported across borders and sold into a life of servitude. In the realm of labor, too, slavery persists. Millions of workers around the globe find themselves trapped in bonded labor, compelled to work off a debt that only seems to grow larger, not smaller. Their freedom is curtailed, their wages are withheld, and their lives are dictated by their so-called employers. The promise of a better life quickly turns into a nightmare of endless toil and exploitation. Then we have the silent victims of child labor, the little hands that are forced to work when they should be learning, playing, and dreaming. Their childhood is stolen from them, replaced by the harsh realities of work, often under hazardous conditions. And let's not forget the forced marriages, where girls and young women are sold into wedded servitude, their lives dictated by someone else's whims and desires. Their voices are silenced, their dreams shattered, and their rights trampled upon. These are the chains in disguise, the modern incarnations of slavery that continue to haunt our world. They may not be as visible or as overt as the shackles of the past, but they are every bit as oppressive and dehumanizing. So, while we honor the struggles of those who fought against the bonds of historical slavery, we must also recognize that the battle is far from over. The fight against slavery continues to this day. The chains may have changed, the masks may have shifted, but the struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for human rights remains as urgent and as necessary as ever. Knowledge is the first step towards change. As we near the conclusion of our journey through the history of slavery, it's essential to revisit the key points we've covered. From the dawn of bondage in ancient civilizations to the transatlantic slave trade's inhumanity, we've explored the dark corners of humanity's past. We've walked in the shoes of those who lived their lives in shackles, and felt the tremors of revolt that changed the course of history. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with the brave souls on the path to liberation who fought tirelessly for the abolition of this horrendous institution. We've felt the weight of the chain's legacy that still lingers, casting long shadows on our societal structures and racial inequalities, and we've seen that, tragically, these chains are not only relics of the past, but continue to hold people captive today in modern forms of slavery. But remember, our journey does not end here, far from it. This exploration of slavery's history is not just a bleak tale of humanity's past, but a call to action. It's a call to delve deeper and learn more, to question the narratives we've been told, to challenge the status quo and to seek the truth. The pages of history are rich with lessons, and it's our responsibility to learn from them. It's also a call to support causes that fight against modern-day slavery and the enduring legacy of racial inequality. Numerous organizations tirelessly work to alleviate the suffering of those still bound by chains, be it literal or metaphorical. They need our help, our voices, and our commitment to change. And perhaps most importantly, it's a call to engage in community discussions. Conversations about our past, no matter how uncomfortable, are essential for shaping a more equitable future. It's through dialogue that we challenge our perspectives, broaden our understanding, and foster empathy. So let's bring these discussions to our dinner tables, our classrooms, and our social platforms. Remember, every voice matters. Your voice matters. It can spark an idea, fuel a movement, or simply make someone feel seen and heard. So, use it. Speak up against injustice, stand up for equality, and strive for a world where no one is bound by chains. In the words of the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. The struggle against the echoes of chains is far from over, but together we can make progress. So let's take this knowledge, this understanding we've gained, and use it as a catalyst for change. Let's honor the memory of those who suffered under the yoke of slavery by fighting for a world free from oppression. Let's ensure that the echoes of chains become a distant whisper, drowned out by the resounding call for justice and equality. Join the fight against the echoes of chains. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Because history is not just a thing of the past, it's a guide to the future, a call to action, a reminder of our responsibility to ensure the atrocities of the past are never repeated. And it is only when we heed this call that we can truly break the chains that bind us.